2021. The time is 5:07 p.m. and I am calling to order the Baldwin Park City Council special meeting. City Clerk, can I please have a roll call?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Daniel Damian,
Here.
Councilmember Monica Garcia,
So I believe Councilmember Garcia and Councilmember Hernandez are running late, so I'll make a motion to excuse them. Can I get a second? Second. Thank you. City Clerk, please continue.
thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Alejandra Avila.
Here.
And Mayor Emanuel Estrada.
Here, thank you for that. At this moment, I will move to open public communications. If there's anybody looking to speak, now is the time. Chief Deputy City Clerk, is there anybody else looking to speak?
No, Mayor. For the 5 o'clock, we did not receive any callers.
Great. So at this moment, I will close the public communication, and I believe we have a study session, and it's going to be presented by our city planner, Ron Garcia.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and staff. Just as a refresher, as you know, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a study session presentation on the ADU incentives that were funded by Measure H. Eurico and I are now ready to introduce the consultant, again, Lasar Development. This is the second of 4 studies that are going to be presented to the council. And tonight we'll have a presentation by Craig Edelman, Farzad Mashoud, and Beatrice from Lasar on HomeKey 2.0 hotel motel site analysis. So I will now hand it over to Lasar.
Great, thanks so much, Ron.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I'll start off and hand it off to you. Thanks, Ron, and great to be with you again, council members and Mayor Pro Tem. It's really continues to be a pleasure to do this work with Baldwin Park and the Mid-Valley cohort that we've been working with on addressing homelessness issues. I'm joined, as Ron mentioned, by my associates Farzad Mashoud and Beatrice Stambuk-Torres, who will be doing the lion's share of the presenting this evening. We're here to present an analysis of hotel and motel conversion strategies. This was identified as one of several approaches in addressing homelessness in the city's homelessness action plan from actually several years ago. And we've been following up, as Ron mentioned, with Measure H funds to figure out opportunities to put these strategies into practice. Since that time, this strategy in particular of hotel and motel conversion has gained significant momentum and has now become the cornerstone of the state's HomeKey program and initiative. And that program has recently been renewed, and the state has just recently made almost $1.5 billion available statewide for HomeKey eligible projects. So we had completed the initial kind of study of hotel motel conversion before this version of HomeKey came about, and since then we've updated it with HomeKey content because of the intersectionality and opportunity in terms of resources for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bea to present the findings.
Hi, everybody. Yes, thanks, Craig. And yeah, again, my name is Bea, and I am here to present our analysis on the feasibility of 4 of Baldwin Park's hotel and motel sites for the state of California's recently released Round 2 HomeKey program that Craig just mentioned. Just to emphasize, so this is a preliminary feasibility study of the hotels and motels using the HomeKey 2.0 criteria. So we're just looking at viability, and all the hotels we are looking at are privately owned, and by no means have we reached out to anyone. So this is just a study, but one with very promising results. So if I can have the next slide, please. Thanks. So this is mentioned by my colleague Craig a little bit, but so yes, our aim was to explore the conversion of the local hotels and motels to housing for people experiencing homelessness, utilizing the HomeKey 2.0 NOFA as a feasibility metric. And this NOFA was just released just a few weeks ago, so it's very timely. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So yeah, this NOFA has a lot of money, and it's which is very significant, especially considering that the prior 2020 NOFA had $600 million. And in this second round, there's $359 million allocated to LA County for all the applications submitted before January 31st. After which, all the money that hasn't been awarded gets pulled together for the whole state, and applicants have until May 2nd or until the funds are exhausted. There's also $116 million set aside specifically for projects that target youth homelessness. And this pool won't disintegrate after the January 31st deadline, and it'll continue until May 2nd. So a few major details to keep in mind regarding the program. The funds must be spent within 8 months of the award. Construction and rehabilitation must be completed within 12, and full occupancy within 90 days of completion. So timing for HomeKey 2.0 is of the essence if these projects are to meet these deadlines. But the good news, right, is that Baldwin Park has some promising options. So before jumping in though, if I can have the next slide, just a brief overview of the methodology that was used in the study. So we utilized all the program's site-related threshold and scoring criteria. So this is a screenshot of the table that's in the report. So the first one is, does the site seem like it can meet that rapid development timeline? The second one was, does the site have any major environmental obstacles that would inhibit meeting this rapid development timeline? Can I have the next slide, please? And this is the second part of that same table. We looked at the site's location and whether it scores well in proximity to the amenities laid out in the NOFA. And if the site has first floor units that can be easily accessible by people with mobility impairments. We also included some comparable properties in the report for each of the hotels and motels that have been recently sold to help estimate acquisition costs. And we also included acquisition and rehabilitation costs of prior 2020 HomeKey projects to help do the same thing. All right, so without further ado, let's just jump into the analysis. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the first one, Grand Park Inn. It's a hotel that's got 3 stories. It's built in 1990. It's got 115 rooms. And the 1990s is relatively recent also, comparing with other hotels and motels. And that year is important also because it gives us an insight as to the possible rehabilitation needs that may be needed. And there's a few additional features that also are interesting. And there's some parking as well, which is helpful. Not part of the scoring criteria, but it's good to have. Next slide, please. This jumps into more of the analysis. So the rehabilitation complete within 12 months seems possible. There are no environmental obstacles that would seemingly inhibit that rapid site development. It scores well in the amenities, that a section that says community impact and site selection. It scores well with the amenities itself, the proximity to amenities, and also with to meet the accessibility standards required by HomeKey. And then the squares on the bottom are comparable properties within 10 miles, and also that were recently sold and within the same class. And class is an identification category used by the CoStar database, which is a private real estate database that uses the nightly cost to stay at this hotel. And we considered this a proxy to understand the quality of the hotel to help acquisition costs. The first bullet point under that table is the average per unit acquisition costs of all the hotels in that table, the comparable projects. And the next two are average per unit award and acquisition cost of 2020 HomeKey projects with a similar unit count in LA County. Next slide, please. The next one's the Courtyard. So it's built in 1989, has a significant amount of rooms, 195. It's got 10 stories. It's got plenty of additional features, in particular the meeting and office space. And if considered for permanent supportive housing, that meeting and office space may be helpful for on-site supportive services that will be needed. Otherwise, rehabbing some of the units themselves for office space may be needed, may need to do, which would diminish the unit count, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. Next slide, please. The rapid site development, rehabilitation complete within 12 months seems possible. There are a few environmental factors that would inhibit that rapid site development. Scores with flying colors with the amenities and the accessibility standards. The section, the two columns at the end there are the two comparable properties. And again, that first bullet point is the average per unit acquisition costs for those two comparable projects. And then the next two are average per unit award and acquisition cost for 2020 home key projects, right? So the prior round of home key with a similar unit count in LA County. And these are to help estimate those acquisition costs. All right, next slide, please. The Royal Night Motel, also viable, significantly less unit counts, right? So we got 30 rooms. It's 2 stories. It's built in 1965, which is older than the other ones. Next slide, please. So rehabilitation complete within 12 months does seem possible, but for this one in particular, an on-site visit is recommended to really ground that truth, right? So that'll help confirm that rehab timeline will be able to meet. There's no significant environmental obstacle that would inhibit that rapid site development. And then it also passes well with the amenities and also that accessibility standard. Then there's the comparable properties, those 5 that are listed right there, the same as the other one, the 5 comparable properties. And then that first bullet point again is the average per unit acquisition cost for comparable properties in that table. And then again, the next 2 bullet points are the average per unit award and acquisition costs for prior home key projects in LA County with a similar unit count. The per unit acquisition cost was not available for comparable projects for this analysis for this hotel. Next slide, please. The Aristocrat Motel, not viable. It does have a small unit count, but that wasn't a scoring metric in the Home Key 2.0 NOFA. It's mostly not viable because rapid site development doesn't seem feasible. So it's built in 1948. If I can have the next slide, please. It's built in 1948, and just there's significant red flags that told us that rehabilitation within those 12 months, as the Home Key 2.0 scoring and threshold criteria states, is just not possible. But an on-site visit would help confirm this. I'm not going to go into the other ones, but they're all laid out right there in the report, so we can have a little more time with questions and a conversation. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So I think we have enough time for a few questions and comments if anybody wants to jump in.
Great, thank you for that presentation. So I think my only concern would be if we pick if we tried to go after a respectable hotel like the Marriott, then I think we would be potentially losing out on taxes. Is that correct? On revenue. So it might be, if we were to pursue this, we would want to go after a least desirable location. Yeah, so we do have those numbers, and we can look into the taxes. We didn't include that in this analysis. My colleague Farzad can also jump in. He did that section of the analysis. But Farzad, do you have anything else to say regarding that? Great, thank you. And then if any council members have any questions, concerns?
A concern as well.
Yeah. Okay,
I
Mayor
would
Pro Tem.
not be in favor of looking at that. I think Marriott, they hold a lot of great, it's a good opportunity. Tax revenue, and the fact that we have a Marriott that we can provide those services for our community. I don't think Marriott is good.
Great. Are there any other questions or concerns, comments?
Yeah, Mayor, I'd also like to see maybe the potential of the Grand Park Inn. I think that that's a motel that we're currently having a lot of issues with now. It does have 115 rooms. I think that would probably be the more logic way to go, in my opinion.
And then, so just to reiterate, you said, I mean, would be 100% of the cost would be coming in from state funds.
Yeah.
Not-
So, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Bay, I'll jump in. Not necessarily. That's going to depend on the project structure, financing, costs, et cetera. So the analysis would be that we performed would be to leverage as much funding as allowable through the Home Key program. It's also worth noting, and I don't think we mentioned that while the applicant for Home Key has to be a public entity, city or county, that's not necessarily within the control of the city. So I think the first round of Home Key, the County of Los Angeles went out and did a number of Home Key projects on their own. It's a bit controversial, and just worth noting that the first Home Key round was under an extremely tight deadline. So there was not time for a lot of process. I don't think that's the anticipation this time around. So worth noting that a Home Key application would require public support, but not necessarily the city's support. Although again, I think the likelihood would be that if the county is pursuing Home Key opportunities, I believe they are seeking to be more collaborative with local jurisdictions as well. But to the original question, we are looking at approaches that wouldn't require additional city funding per se, but there is a match, both a match requirement and then a match benefit in terms of scoring. Bea, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So there is a match, like Craig says. It's at the capital baseline. It's dependent on the target population. So if a person is chronically homeless, or if the project itself is directed towards homeless youth, there's a few variables. Another variable is it depends on the if it's a studio, a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom. But just I'm looking at it right now, and and it's also dependent on the cost, right? So if the total cost per door is $140,000, for example, the Home Key project, the Home Key program does cover the full amount, but then afterwards there is a capital match.
So just worth noting, that's something, again, that there could be opportunity for collaboration with the county. The county has money available for match in this. So again, not necessarily falling on the city of Baldwin Park.
I have another question.
Yes. So before you ask your question, Mayor Pro Tem, kind of speaking of needing community support, I think one of the biggest issues is, how does it operate? So is this going to be a regional approach, or does it prioritize the Baldwin Park homeless residents, or are we going to see kind of an influx of people who need it, but from outside of our jurisdiction? Because I think that was one of the issues when Motel 6 opened. The Motel 6 was turned over to a Home Key, and 100% of those residents are not from Baldwin Park.
Bea, I can start. Correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly, but I do think the funding sources will require access to a broad range of people, rather than restricting to Baldwin Park residents, or to be able to handpick, so to speak, occupants that are served by the development. But my experience is that in considering a project sponsor who would ultimately, potentially own and operate the facility, and the process they use for outreach, that's really where the opportunity, again, to collaborate with somebody who recognizes those objectives of the city and can effectively do outreach that particularly targets Baldwin Park constituents, residents, et cetera.
If I could just add to that, I think another aspect of the Home Key program that might address this is that projects can target different populations. You can have a development that targets, for example, families by having larger units, or a project that targets youth. And there's actually different incentives for targeting those populations. So by the city taking on an application and pursuing a project, it can decide we want to focus on, for example, this population that's important to our city.
But that population not being geographic, right, Farzad?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Great.
So if I can ask,
If I may,
go ahead, Councilman.
Councilor Hernandez.
oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Protem, I think you had,
It's really quick.
go ahead.
I just
Sorry about
wanted to touch back on what the mayor had said regarding the population it's going to target, because the Motel 6 we have now, and that was one of our big concerns, that it doesn't help anybody in our community. Of course, we want to help the homeless community. Everybody that's homeless needs help. I understand that. But we also need to think of our community and make sure that our community members are first ones to get services. But what I'm hearing is that won't necessarily be the situation. We may be able to get some of our community members there, but we may not. And again, I understand having to help the homeless community. Another question I have is, once once these homes are filled or these apartments are filled, is there a work training process for these people that are living there? What kind of programs do they offer for them there so they can move ahead? Because it's a home key project, so this is temporary, correct? No, it's permanent housing?
Yes, please, Craig.
Let me quickly differentiate that that Home Key is different than Project Room Key,
Okay.
which was the state's immediate response to COVID and the immediate crisis of having homeless people on the street in high vulnerability to COVID. And so that was an effort to get people off the street temporarily into vacant hotels and motels. That kind of gave birth to Home Key, which is a longer term, generally focused on permanent supportive housing rather than temporary or transient housing. And I believe the Motel 6 that you're speaking of was a Room Key project. So there are some fundamental differences programmatically. Now, Home Key does offer opportunities also for transitional housing facilities as well. And so that, again, that would be at the option of the city if they wanted to support a program of that nature. But Bea and or Farza, do you want to talk about the services component?
Well, permanent supportive housing does have, frequently, it does have on-site services. So, and a lot of these on-site services themselves are employment training programs. They support folks to access local or regional jobs, and also just financial education also is included many times. If the project is geared towards homeless youth, there is also a requirement that certain amenities need to be around it, including these like apprenticeship programs, community colleges, professional training schools, such as these. So there is that focus to try to support folks in getting, helping themselves and getting, supporting themselves sometimes in getting a job or getting educated in the tools they need to support themselves.
Okay, and when people are put in here, again, they can be from anywhere in the LA County. If there is severe mental illness, are these residents put in the same location, or is this not for anybody with mental illness? Do we have other facilities for that, other homes?
So there's different target populations that you can choose. So again, if you there's the homeless youth category. You can also have if you have 2 to 3 bedrooms, you can also focus your project to be more geared towards families. You do get more points if you have units specifically geared towards people experiencing chronic homelessness. Craig or Farzad, do you have any more additions?
Okay.
Go ahead,
That's
Farz.
my questions for now. I'll think of more, I'm sure.
Just to add to the Mayor Pro Tem question, I think what we want to convey is that really it's up to the application that the city puts together. If the city wants to target a particular population, it can.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just for my clarification, can you define youth?
Yes, it's going to take me a quick second, but I'm pretty sure it's people under a certain age. I don't remember if it's 21 or 25.
I believe it's 25.
25.
Let's let Bea check that.
So a young adult under the age of 25 and 18?
Transitional age youth is 18 to 24.
18 to 24. Okay, thank you. So that then leads me to kind of my thoughts in regards to this project or this application. I would certainly support, a project that would help the youth, but more importantly, the emancipated youth out of foster systems, because LA County has several 100,000 individuals that, essentially become young adults as they turn 18. If we are not able to help, necessarily our Baldwin Park specific population, which I have no confidence that will be the case, just given the regionality of the funding and so forth. So if that's the case, my support would be in and around youth, especially specific with emancipated youth, but also with families and seniors. Because again, these are the people that are on the cusp of homeless, and these are the individuals that need the most additional support as we move forward for transition folks out of the homeless population into more permanent housing. Now, if we're looking as a whole, as a city, to have just regular individuals, that are not adults and so forth, then that are not part of a family or a senior or those youth that I just spoke about, then I'm not in support of this project, because at that point, Baldwin Park is just going to be looked upon as another city in which you can put homeless population. And I think there's other cities that can take up that responsibility if they want to do it in that way. But if we want to be specific and mindful in the way we assist our community in the region, then I think it would be wise of us to look at the youth, the seniors, and the families. Because again, those families that have kids, those individuals become part of our fabric. They also become part of our school district. So that's an area which I know that there's quite a bit of services through the school district. So I feel very confident in that process, right? So, and then when it comes to the emancipated folks, there are lots, as you mentioned, there are job training opportunities nearby through the college. There's with the trades. So there's opportunities to get young adults into the trades, and more importantly, provide them the opportunity to enter into the middle class. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes, Councilmember Damon.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I don't know who can answer this, but how much, if anything, will this cost the city of Baldwin Park?
Yeah, so just in terms of funding, there's a capital baseline amount of, sorry, I just had it up, but there's it's like 175 per door. It depends on the target population. So if you house chronically homeless, there's a little bit more, and if you house a homeless youth, it's also a little bit more. I think it's up to $200,000 per door. And then there is a one-to-one match. So if the locality contributes, whatever the locality contributes, HCD will also contribute up to $100,000 beyond that capital baseline amount.
Bea, just to be clear, the first numbers you gave, the $200,000 per door, that's the amount that the state is providing through HomeKey, right? Not the councilman's question was how much it's going to cost the city, so I don't want to confuse.
Yes.
So.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for catching that, Craig. Yes, that is the program, how much HCD would contribute per door.
So Councilman, I believe it could cost the city nothing. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a competitive application. We have to assess it. We also don't know how competitive this round is going to be because there's so much money coming from the state. But as I stated earlier, some of that match or even all of that match to be competitive could potentially come through the county as well without local city money.
So when you say competitive, if we were to want to come in competitive, what would you maybe estimate would be the cost to the city? Maybe roughly.
Yeah, Farzad, do you have are we able to put a number out like that? I don't want to throw anything out.
And it could be a ballpark number, just so we have an idea.
I think without knowing the costs of the hotel, it would be hard to, we wouldn't really be able to estimate. But what we know is the state will provide at least $150,000 per unit. So if you're buying a hotel that costs a lot more than that, it'll cost the city. And then on top of the acquisition costs, the applicants have to identify ongoing funding sources for operations costs. So there are ways to find operations funding sources that don't cost the city anything, but like Craig said, it depends on what's available to the city.
And Councilman, I just want to be prudent because we're talking about private property that is not necessarily on the market. It probably isn't wise for us to be discussing, potential numbers like that because of the acquisition price being the key variable there.
Got it. Now, if we were to house, with our tiny home community that we're bringing into the city, that's a temporary, anywhere from, 60 to 90 days. So would any of the folks that are being housed in our tiny home community qualify to enter into the Home Key program?
I couldn't say for certain, but I certainly think so in concept. We could do some work on that, but the idea of the tiny home community being a transitional facility, and again, if the ultimate use for a potential Home Key project in Baldwin Park were for permanent supportive housing, that would certainly conceptually be the concept, right? In terms of the continuum of care, that's the terminology we use, right? So moving from the street potentially to an interim facility and then to a permanent housing situation.
And that's what Home Key would be. It would be a permanent supportive system. So we would basically transition from the street, tiny home, to now the Home Key program.
That's certainly the concept. Yeah.
My last.
If I may add, Councilmember Danny Damon, this is Yuriko.
Hi, Yuriko. Go ahead.
Hi. It would also depend on the population served. So the population served at the tiny home village would have to match that of the Project Home Key. So if we were interested in, hypothetically, say the Tay youth, 18 to 24, anyone who falls within that age group would be a viable candidate to then move forward to that continuum of care. If we're talking families, it would probably not be a viable forward solution because we don't allow families in the tiny home village. And then the last category would be seniors. That would be another viable population. So it could fall within the continuum of care. So just kind of understanding the population who we serve at the tiny home village, how that would transition then with the Project Home Key, should that be decided.
Got it, understood. Thank you, Yuriko. And my last question is, I keep hearing about points. Can you elaborate a little bit more about these points and what are these points? How do we get these points and what does that mean for us?
That we can do, Bea.
So if you, hopefully Ron maybe distributed the report to you all, I hope so. The report itself, in the first few pages, you'll find the table that I used in the presentation, the screenshots at the beginning demonstrating the methodology. That is a simplified summary of the scoring criteria, which are the points, the Home Key points that each project would need to score to be competitive for funds.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. So, I mean, I think we definitely want to learn more and be able to have this conversation more in depth. I think maybe, regarding the type of demographic that we're looking to serve, we can potentially work with our school district and other local stakeholders to try to get a better idea of what the homeless demographic looks like in Baldwin Park and try to cater to that a little bit more. But I do think that we want to be careful, especially with regional efforts. We have the tiny home program. We've just acquired another property where we're trying to provide different services, and I think we've done that carefully with and very independently from any other sort of regional effort, because we're trying to make an effort, but also make sure that it benefits the residents in our jurisdiction. So I definitely want to keep this conversation going and trying to put in as many stakeholders as possible to see how we can potentially, if possible, get a project like this going.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a recommendation?
Yes, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, sir. I'd ask staff and the consultants to, if they can look at, one or two of the properties that you've listed out, and give us a scenario of, of the populations that we've spoke about, at least specific what I'm talking about, at least maybe the seniors, the foster individuals, or the youth, as you may call them, and the families, and give us a perspective of, when it comes to the points, what are our chances, and more importantly, what can we look at in the sense of, should the buildings sell for, the value of what we believe, say 15 and even 15 million, maybe even 20 million, or whatever the number. I'll let the geniuses kind of figure that number out, and then that gives us a sense of, what the contribution would be from the city perspective, at least an estimate. I mean, I know it's hard to predict anything, right? I'm not asking for a magic ball, but that gives us a sense of, the parameters in which we can be making decisions. Because right now, there is no information as to, what this may look like, what this may cost us. And what was also mentioned was the ongoing costs, right? The maintenance costs, right? The service costs, right? That is a big significant piece, because that ties the city to those long-term costs, and that takes away from other services that we like to provide in the future. So that would be kind of my general recommendation, is for them to kind of come back with that type of framework, at least at the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. So we'll definitely keep this in mind. Thank you to the Lessard Development Group for being here and providing us with this information. I believe at this point we do need to move on, and we need to go into closed session.
All right. Well, thank you so much to everybody. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.